Portal combat! The transfer portal is officially open, and it's hit the Oklahoma Sooners in some interesting ways we'll discuss on tonight's episode of Locked On Sooners Live.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners, and thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. We're free and available on all podcast platforms. Hit that subscribe button to let you know when new episodes drop. My name is John Williams. You can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. My buddy here is Josh Helmer. You can follow him on Twitter at JoshOnRef. You can also hear him Monday through Friday from 9 to noon on the KREF Sports app. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase of the best tickets at the lowest prices over at Game Time. Josh, the transfer portal is hot and heavy already on the opening day of college free agency. And the biggest news was Dillon Gabriel entering the portal. I think most of us assumed that, okay, he's heading elsewhere after this year, but that elsewhere, the assumption was the NFL. And now we got Gabriel entering the portal, which is a fascinating decision to say the least.
Yeah, and I would imagine he's going to command the type of NIL offer that's just about as competitive as, Riley Leonard, Will Howard, you name it, right? I mean, whichever names you want to toss out as the top quarterbacks in the portal, would you not include Dillon Gabriel among that grouping of quarterbacks? So somebody's going to be happy, whether that's Oregon, if it's Florida State, post Jordan Travis. Maybe, it ends up where we thought this thing was going to start, which is following Levy to Mississippi State. It sounds like maybe there's some offers from a competitive standpoint and from a spotlight standpoint that would be grander than Mississippi State. And that's with no high level of disrespect. That's just the reality of Oregon and Florida State as compared to Mississippi State. So I think Dillon Gabriel will be a coveted quarterback. And now the question for me immediately in the aftermath of this is, it reads like Dillon Gabriel is not playing in the bowl game either. I mean, I don't think you release the statement and make the announcement and have the fanfare to all of it if you're playing in the Alamo Bowl. So I expect Dillon Gabriel, I expect that his Oklahoma career is curtains, and I think it's Jackson Arnold season.
Yeah, I think that's the only assumption we can make, because you don't go through all that. You don't leak it out there. You don't put your name in the transfer portal at this point if you're planning on playing. That's my opinion. I think if he were going to play, we wouldn't know that DG was in the transfer portal until like day after the bowl game. And that's fair to him. Like, he gave Oklahoma 2 years. He's got a future that he's looking out for. And I think it's okay that, he's stepping aside. Honestly, it says a little bit about him that he feels like he can step aside, let Jackson Arnold take the start, be the player, and usher in this new era of Oklahoma football. It would be rare to find a quarterback that would be okay, kind of after having the season that he just had, if the coaching staff came to him and said, hey, what we meant about this being your last year is what we meant, and you're going to have to kind of find somewhere else. And I don't think that that's a shot at Dillon Gabriel. I just think there was a succession plan in place, and they're ready to get Jackson Arnold going. And that could go great. First year in the SEC, it could go not so great. But I think it's part of the plan of what they're trying to build toward. Even if it's some growing pains in 2024, it's in order to have this team ready to contend by 2025. And you got to get Jackson Arnold going at some point. But, for Dillon Gabriel, there are going to be a lot of options. I think any big-time program in the country, after what we just saw from Dillon Gabriel, would be thrilled to have him as their quarterback. There's only going to be a few programs that are going to have quote unquote better quarterbacks than Gabriel going into next year. And so like the Oregon situation, I mean, to me, that seems money. That seems like the obvious choice. Oregon's already pursuing him based on just the social media follows, and Dillon Gabriel's quite intrigued based on his own social media follows. And, the idea of following in kind of the Marcus Mariota footsteps, although it's, years apart, but being able to go to a place where Marcus Mariota was beloved. He was one of the transcendent players of the game during his era and helped Oregon kind of reach these new heights. I mean, Dillon Gabriel has a chance to take an Oregon team that was on the cusp of title contention this year and be a part of maybe potentially putting them into Big Ten title contention next year and probably the college football playoff. I get the Mississippi State line of thinking, the connections there. That Jeff Lebby connection was so strong that it was able to pull Dillon Gabriel away from UCLA to Oklahoma. But I think there's a very different dynamic at play, UCLA versus Oklahoma and Oregon versus Mississippi State. UCLA, I mean, they were a better program this year, but they were not going to be a title contender. Oklahoma had a chance each of the last couple of years. 2022, it wasn't good, but 2023 was much better. Mississippi State is going to be a middle of the pack at best SEC program next year. It might be like a lower third SEC team, as opposed to going to a team like Oregon that's got great skill talent, great coaching, a really good defense, and is going to have a chance to put them into the college football playoff and potentially make some noise. And if we've seen anything from Dillon Gabriel, it's he continues to get better. He got better from 2022 to 2023. And if he works on his game like he did this past offseason and continues to get better, he's going to be potentially a Heisman candidate for real next season.
So a couple of folks have commented about this, and the first pick of the 5th round, this was from a story I'm reading right here ahead of last year's 2023 NFL draft, right? First pick of the 5th round signs a contract worth approximately $4.2 million, which sounds like a big bag of cash, right? Like, hey, if I'm a 5th round pick, 6th round pick in that neighborhood, that's a nice little chunk of change. But the signing bonus for that first pick of the 5th round, and I would classify Gabriel around that range, 5th, 6th, 7th, I think. Right now, maybe a 4th round. I don't know, right? We won't know, I don't think, because it seems like he's leaning toward exploring the transfer portal and a name, image, likeness offer that would exceed the signing bonus of approximately $384,000. Let's round up. Let's call it $385 in a signing bonus that the first pick of the 5th round in last year's draft was earning. So I depending on where you fall on the ledger, John, of, okay, Matt Rule's dead on, ball's accurate here. He knows that it's $1 million, it's 1.5, it's 2 for the best quarterbacks in college football in terms of name, image, likeness, compensation packages, or if it's, somewhere around there, even if it's $1 million, if it's a 7-figure deal that Dillon Gabriel's garnering from an Oregon, from a Florida State, from a you name it, wherever he winds up, right? Well, that's 3 times as much money guaranteed as you were going to get from, say being the first pick of the 5th round. So it makes sense why this would be appealing. And for players like Dillon Gabriel that are a little bit undersized, John, but have worlds of collegiate production. And for programs like Oregon that don't want to have that drop-off year, these rental type seasons, I think you're going to watch this become a trend in college football. It'd be fun if we went to Oregon, man. The schedule has Texas Tech on it, Boise State. It's got Ohio State in Eugene. There's a Michigan game in Ann Arbor on it. We'll see about Wisconsin in year 2 and Luke Fickell. That might still take a little bit longer. Washington is a rivalry game. We'll see what they look like post Michael Penix Jr., but that would be kind of tasty.
No, there are going to be a lot of really, really fun matchups in the bowl, in the Big Ten next year. But I think to the point about the NFL, this is what Brent Venables talks about. You only get one shot at the NFL. Now, if you're a quarterback, often you get more than one shot, and you can create a long career by being somebody's backup. If you're a Chase Daniel, Colt McCoy, they have long careers. Colt McCoy is still playing, for crying out loud, being good backups in the NFL. And I think Dillon Gabriel, that's kind of his floor. I think he could be a really solid backup quarterback for a long time, pushing for the potential to be a starter somewhere. I mean, it's not likely, but we're seeing Brock Purdy have a ton of success right now for the San Francisco 49ers. So it's not impossible for Dillon Gabriel to go and be a long-term starter in the league. But I think just cashing out when you can. You know what I mean? There's no sense in not. He's getting the opportunity to take that on. I totally get, the idea that maybe he should move on to the NFL because he just had a career year. But to me, his stock is not really going to grow a whole lot more. I mean, he improved like situationally, but some of the tools, especially as a passer, are about the same. He just got better situationally, got better, accurately, and he's just a better running quarterback than he was a year ago. So some things got better. A lot of things are about the same. He just became a more efficient player than he's been. So it's going to be fascinating to see where he lands. And I think Oregon looks like the move. And I'd be surprised if it's anywhere other than Oregon, because it really just seems like there's too much smoke on that duck right now for Dillon Gabriel. But I commented with a couple of my guys over at Sooners Wire just how fire I think Dillon Gabriel will look in some of those Ducks uniforms, because I'm a fan. I like the Ducks uniforms. So I think that could be a lot of fun. We got so much more transfer portal stuff to discuss because a bunch of people entered the transfer portal for Oklahoma. We'll also discuss some early targets that the Oklahoma Sooners might be targeting as well in the portal. We'll do more of this, and we'll talk more about all the portal stuff after the break. If you're looking for last-minute tickets at the lowest prices, go check out Game Time. It's a fantastic app. It's easy to use. You can get it in your App Store or Google Play Store. You don't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event, because Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals and all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Again, see the view from your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. That is my favorite feature on the Game Time app. I know exactly what I'm looking at. I don't have to guess what my view is going to be. I can see where I'm going to be in relation to the field, the court, and they're going to have great deals for the Alamo Bowl as well. So make sure you go to Game Time, download the app in your App Store or Google Play Store, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's Game Time. Get $20 off your first purchase by using Locked On College. That's LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Josh, there were a number of players that entered the transfer portal today, some of varying degrees. And I think let's start here. Key Lawrence enters the portal, and I think that's maybe the most significant one from a snaps played in 2023 perspective compared to Dillon Gabriel. Obviously, Dillon Gabriel is the most influential one, but we knew that he was kind of going out the door. But Key Lawrence, he was a starter at times, a big-time rotational piece for the safety position, but he's heading into the portal.
Potentially the most impactful guys beyond Dillon Gabriel, which obviously everybody's excited about because that means that you're beckoning in the Jackson Arnold era. But beyond that, in terms of on-field losses, the biggest production, are Tawi Walker and Key Lawrence. Reggie Grimes was somebody that you thought maybe a couple of years ago he was about to morph into a star right before the 2022 season. Injuries probably played their role in not allowing that to happen. And again, he got passed up in the mix this season too. So makes sense why he would be in the portal. Dalen Smothers, I saw some folks shocked by the Dalen Smothers news. I guess maybe I just come from a different line of thinking on this. You had a running back position for Oklahoma that it took until the final month of the season. And Dalen Smothers and Caleb Hicks never seriously got a look. Until, you could say, okay, they put him in the Oklahoma State game, but he didn't have 20 carries, right, in the Oklahoma State game. So I wasn't super surprised by that. And obviously, with what Oklahoma's got, with Gavin Sawchuk's emergence, let's hope that Javante Barnes sticks. Let's hope that a Caleb Hicks sticks. Obviously, you've got Megwa there. You've got Tatum coming in. So there's a lot of talent still in Oklahoma's running back room. I guess I wasn't shocked by that movement with Dalen Smothers.
Yeah, I wasn't shocked so much, one, because my guy Bryant Cruz tipped me off that was going to be happening. But My guy Bryant Cruz from the North Carolina area. Dalen Smothers also from North Carolina. Yeah, it's shocking in that it's okay. You got a 4-star guy who was just here for a year, but it's not shocking also in that, man, sometimes just situations don't work out, or sometimes you move halfway across the country and it doesn't go the way you want it to go. You know, you feel differently about living in a place halfway across the country than you do about visiting a place halfway across the country. When you're, that far from your family, your friends, things like that, it's different. So I don't know the exact reasons why he decided to go into the portal, but I assume that some of it is wanting to see some playing time. Some of it might be wanting to be closer to home. We'll see. This is an intriguing guy that I think ran a lot harder than I expected him to run. I thought he was a lot more physical than I thought a guy of his stature would be. So I think he's going to have some really intriguing offers out there for him in the transfer portal, because he's a talent. I mean, he's a breakaway talent, a guy that can hit the big play anytime he touches the ball. So somebody's going to really get a really nice running back out of the portal by targeting Dalen Smothers, and he'll probably fly under the radar because he just doesn't have the production yet. But if those guys are true to their evaluation, the scouts, the running back coaches, the head coaches, the offensive coordinators, if they're true to their evaluations of him as a high school prospect, then he had offers from Bama and Florida State and NC State. Maybe Clemson was on there too, but he had a lot of big time offers. So it would not surprise me to see him land a big time offer as well. Going back to Key Lawrence, there's this term that gets thrown around a lot of times in NFL circles about progress stoppers. You don't bring veterans in sometimes through free agency because you don't want them getting in the way of playing time for your young draft picks, whether it's a first or second year guy. You want to get those guys on the field, but if you bring in a veteran, sometimes you feel obligated to play that guy and not get those guys the opportunities on the field. Key Lawrence, I mean, he was a solid player, but is he somebody that you should have on the field in place of a guy like Peyton Bowen? No. Robert Spears Jennings, I don't think so. I think Robert Spears Jennings was an ascending player and was going to continue to get better and better. You've got young safeties like a Day McCullough. Justin Harrington's coming back. He's probably your cheetah, but he could also be a safety for you. You're going to have good safeties in the 2024 signing class in Jaden Hardy. You might even land a safety in the transfer portal that you like, somebody that Brandon Hall or Jay Valaya is really, really high on. Key Lawrence was a solid player, part of the holdover from the Alex Grinch era. At times, it's just time to move on, and it's time to let your young guys be your guys. It's time to let Peyton Bowen and Robert Spears Jennings be your starters. They've shown enough to earn an opportunity, and if Billy Bowman's back, then that's your three. Those are your rotating three at safety: Billy Bowman, Peyton Bowen, and Robert Spears Jennings. I don't need to see anybody else on the field.
Right at the tail end, you swooped in and shared my thought. Is this a sneak preview that Key Lawrence knows something that the rest of us are waiting on with Billy Bowman? I mean, that would be the ideal scenario, obviously, for Oklahoma defensively, is, as we've talked about, both Billy Bowman and Danny Stutzman, or one of the two comes back, right? I mean, if you can get one of the two back, then potentially that's light years better for Oklahoma in terms of proven production going into the SEC. I'm optimistic on that, but more realistically, I don't know that it's connected beyond Key Lawrence wants a guaranteed opportunity to play somewhere, and that doesn't exist at Oklahoma with Peyton Bowen, with Robert Spears Jennings, with some of the other names that you talked about in players that are coming in this signing class. And, oh, by the way, I would imagine Oklahoma at that position, as we've also discussed, cornerback, safety, obvious areas. It seems like that Oklahoma would want to do a little portal acquiring themselves.
Yeah, it's certainly possible. I mean, and again, it comes back to if you're Brent Venables, you're Jay Valai, you're Brandon Hall, and you believe that Peyton Bowen, Billy Bowman, Robert Spears Jennings are what's better for your team, and you're honest about that up front with Key, and you look at his snap counts over the last 4 games of the season, Key Lawrence didn't see more than 20 snaps in any game. So I think that says kind of right what we're thinking is that, okay, he had kind of fallen back to this depth option and he wants to play a little bit more than that, and that's understandable. So, I mean, again, he was a good player at times, made some big plays for them, in coverage. He made some big hits. I mean, I still go back to the hit on Brock Purdy back in the 2021 season when he just like blasted Brock Purdy. And then what was it? I think it was Perrion Winfrey picked it up, or maybe it was Jalen Redmond picked it up and ran it in for the thick six. I mean, that was a Key Lawrence play, but it's like 405 Boy said just a little bit ago. He never quite blossomed like we thought he would. He never really took that step into like elite status or great status. Even he was good, just not great.
Well, he didn't become Billy Bowman, right? I mean, isn't that basically what we're talking about? Flashes of some pretty good play, but not consistent star level play. The cornerback experience obviously was forgettable for Key Lawrence, but he was a solid piece for Oklahoma for a couple of seasons. I mean, he finishes the last 3 years with 36 games, 149 tackles, 15 PBUs, couple of picks. So, yeah, while the writing was on the wall a little bit that Oklahoma's got this talented youth movement, and obviously you're not going to play Key Lawrence in favor of Peyton Bowen, right? You're always leaning Peyton Bowen, and we hope that Robert Spears Jennings and others, surpass and are more talented too than Key Lawrence. But let's not, on the way out the door, forget that he was, while not a great player for Oklahoma, pretty productive at times for OU, and wish him the best. He's going to help somebody in Power 5 football.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, he's one of those guys that's got a lot of experience now and can go and be a difference maker for somebody out there on the recruiting trail. On the recruiting show in Power 5 football. So we got more transfer portal thoughts. We'll take your questions, your comments here as well. If you've got a question for us here on the live show, make sure you drop it in the chat. We'll catch it and we'll bring it back up a little bit later in the show. If you are not subscribed to the show, make sure you subscribe here on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. One, so you can be a part of the chat, but also so you can know when new episodes drop. We'll talk more transfer portal stuff and some early targets for the Oklahoma Sooners here coming up after the break. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to have as many top-tier candidates as possible to interview. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have that many qualified candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. Thankfully, with LinkedIn, the process is intuitive, quick, and easy. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Josh, were there any other names that kind of stuck out to you a little bit? Maybe Savion Byrd. I mean, that one was interesting. He'd kind of lost favor a little bit, suffered a concussion and then fell out of the rotation. Didn't play a whole lot over the second half of the season, but you thought maybe going into next year with losing, McKay Matire and Tyler Guyton and Walter Rouse and maybe even Andrew Rame, that there'd be some potential for him to earn a starting role on the offensive line. And now he's headed out the door.
Somebody that won Cheez-It Bowl performance versus Florida State, where he was nasty and wanted to, push guys around and be physical. I fell in love with that. I think a lot of people fell in love with the idea of the physicality and potential for Savion Byrd. Didn't materialize this season when given a larger role. Caden Green, I think, is a no doubt star of the future. It looks like Jacob Sexton is trending that way. We'll see about Taylor and others. I would imagine, like defensive line, like the defensive backfield, offensive line is going to be an obvious emphasis for Oklahoma itself out of the transfer portal. So I was surprised by Savion Byrd going into the portal. I still thought that maybe there was a chance for him to carve out a role in the interior of Oklahoma's offensive line. But obviously it's not going to play out that way. So wish him well. A lot of potential, just did not click and develop further this season for whatever reason.
It's tough for a guy like him. He's a physical player, but he's just a little undersized still. I think given another offseason or two, then he'd get to where he needs to be able to be the kind of player that he wants to be. He's not a finesse player. He's a guy that wants to mix it up. He wants to get dirty. He wants to get physical and hit people and play through the whistle. But also when you're barely pushing 300 and you're going up against some Texas defensive tackles that are 320 or Alabama defensive tackles that are 320, it's tough, man. And that size matters. And if you don't have it, it's going to be a little bit tricky for you. And I think the guy's got a lot of potential still and can be a big time player for somebody at guard. And maybe he needs to even move out to tackle and play a little bit there. Kind of like a Connor Williams type who, he's a Texas Longhorns offensive tackle, bumped inside to play guard for the Dallas Cowboys after he got drafted. Then he bumped out to tackle for the Miami Dolphins. And he played a little bit better because, again, he was undersized. But so many times they look at those arm lengths and they get concerned about a guy's ability to play on the edge. But maybe that'd be beneficial for him. I don't know. Marcus Major hitting the portal is not too terribly surprising. This seemed like a guy that, he could never really just put it together, mostly because he could never stay healthy. And that's the unfortunate part of it for Major, because he's a guy with some pretty explosive talent. We've seen it. We've seen him, take a screenplay the distance or a jet sweep. I know I'm saying dirty words here on the podcast. My apologies to all the kids listening. But an explosive dude that, like Key Lawrence, could go somewhere and have an impact. It might be at a group of 5 level, but still, he's an experienced dude that's played a lot of football that could go and help somebody. There's a lot to be gained from having a Marcus Major on your roster.
Yeah, has played obviously a lot of college football. So he's going to help somebody. Rush for a career-high 308 this season, couple of touchdowns, a little north of 1,000 yards, total yards throughout his Oklahoma career, rushing and a little bit of receiving. He feels to me like a legitimate lower Power 5. Like, I don't know, maybe one of these remaining holdover Big 12 programs that's looking for a running back, maybe group of 5 type running back where he can star and really take the show and best demonstrate all of his qualities over the course of a season where he's the lead running back. I don't think that's happening at, say, in Oklahoma type of school. Just never materialized that way. But obviously wish him the best. And Oklahoma, I think, again, as we discussed with Smothers, with DeMarco Murray in Norman, Oklahoma, I don't think you need to worry too awfully much about recruiting running backs and bringing running backs in out of the portal, signing running backs. You got one of the nation's best running backs coming in Tatum. We'll see, right? I mean, time's going to tell on that front how SEC ready he is to start. But obviously our comfort level and knowing that running back is a position of attrition, can't just have Gavin Sawchuk, right? You wouldn't think. But knowing that you've got the Gavin Sawchuk that we saw at the end of the year is pretty comforting going into next season, even despite a Smothers exit, a Major exit.
Staying on the running back position, Opossum Paws asks the question, what's the over-under on Hicks hitting the portal? You might be talking David Hicks, but for this conversation, I'm going to say you're talking about Caleb Hicks, the Oklahoma Sooners running back, and not the Texas A&M defensive tackle. You can correct me if I'm wrong here, but on Caleb Hicks, I think he sticks around. I think this coaching staff really likes him. Brent Venables has talked really, really highly of him. Same with DeMarco Murray. And given that, that Smothers is gone and Major is gone, I think you have a good opportunity if you're Hicks to be able to carve out a role, even if it's as the second or third, running back next season, depending on what's going on with Javonte Barnes.
The Barnes situation, is that important? Jimmy asks, will Barnes play in the bowl game? I mean, we're probably going to know quick, right? Whether or not he's sticking or going.
Yeah, I got to imagine. I think if he were going, he would have gone. I don't think he'll go simply because it'd be a little bit risky for him considering he was injured most of the year. And he's kind of got a secure situation here and an opportunity to carve out a role. Again, he was your second leading rusher back in 2022 behind Eric Gray. I mean, he's the guy that everybody thought was going to come onto the scene and really be the lead running back for this team in 2023, but it didn't really materialize that way. And now he's going to have to kind of reset a little bit this offseason and just hope that he can stay healthy for the offseason and actually put in the work and develop both physically and mentally and continue to work on his game. Because if he's injured, it's hard to be out there on the practice field, getting those practice reps and continuing to work on your game, especially as you're, learning some new intricacies to your offense that Seth Luttrell wants to install. So for my money, I kind of hope they don't play him, simply because I'm ready to let him just get ready for the offseason and start preparing for the offseason. Now, if he's 100% healthy, then by all means, roll him out there. But if he's 99% healthy, then save him. Just save it. Just let it be and figure it out in the offseason. I think potentially he could redshirt still, if I'm not mistaken. Well, I guess the Bulls don't count towards redshirt, so never mind. So just let him worry about the offseason. That'd be my preferred plan for Javonte Barnes.
I'm mentally prepared for him to run for 175 yards and be bowl game Javonte Barnes. And it's like a spring performer, but in this instance, a bowl game performer for Oklahoma. And that will, of course, spark many an offseason conversation about how Gavin Sawchuk and Javonte Barnes are the clear 1 and 2 running backs for Oklahoma. So just people get mentally prepared with me for that to potentially happen in this game.
That's right. We'll have Twilight Zone just like we did last offseason as well. Any other names from Oklahoma's transfer portal departures that stuck out to you? They lost Nate Anderson, who was the second highest rated, prospect in their 2020 class, a 4-star player. But again, some of these other guys, Marcus Hicks, didn't really materialize for him here at Oklahoma. Maybe he's going to have an opportunity to do something somewhere else. I don't know, just not really a whole lot. I mean, Oklahoma, they Key Lawrence is Tolly Walker, the most significant names you've lost?
Yeah, I think so. Key, obviously DG, but you feel good because you're ready to turn the page there. Savion Byrd, maybe. I mean, time's going to tell on that front. Hopefully it means that Oklahoma has a couple of options that maybe they like or know about out of the transfer portal. Don't have that on any, solidified confirmed ground yet, but maybe it's an early signal of that. That would be nice for Oklahoma, that you got obviously Caden Green, who again I think we both agree on and probably everybody agrees on in Sooner Nation is a star, and Sexton is trending that direction. And then hopefully there's some plug and play impact guys out there. I mean, we saw what Walter Rouse brought to Oklahoma. I guess Guyton was here for the 1 year beforehand, right? But again, that's somebody that you went and found out of the portal that helped you a lot. So Oklahoma clearly along its offensive line is going to have to find a couple of guys like that. And with Savion Byrd's departure, I think that it just ratchets up the need for that, because this is somebody, even though it didn't totally happen, John, I do think there was still that potential there. Obviously, we're not going to see it.
Yeah, the Sooners are going to be active in the offensive line transfer portal. Bill Bedenbaugh's shown a really pretty good track record over the last few years of targeting transfer portal offensive linemen, whether it's Chris Murray or McKay Mathieu or Walter Rouse. I think Walter Rouse probably the best of those three. Tyler Guyton was pretty good as well. I think he's got a lot of room to work on, but I think Walter Rouse is probably the most steady of the four, transfer portal offensive linemen they've grabbed over the last 3-4 years. I do think that they're going to have to be active. I do think, if Rame does go, you've got a guy that could replace him in Troy Everett. I think that's somebody that they're going to be really, really high on, that could step right in and play center. He was good for App State in their game against Texas A&M a couple years back. So that's an intriguing name there. You also got Josh Bates, friend of the show here of Locked On Sooners. Josh Bates, another offseason with Schmitty, another offseason to kind of get himself right and ready to play. Could potentially compete for a starting role there. And then, other places, offensive line. Heath Ozida, another friend of the show, could end up competing for some tackle snaps. Jacob Taylor, we talked about a little bit as well. Kim here asks, thank you, Josh. You read my mind. Kim, you ask a great question. Kim Hurst asks, does Caden Green move to tackle? I would not put it past the Sooners to put him back at tackle, where kind of that was the original plan. But I think given how successful he was at guard, I'd be okay with him staying at guard. He could potentially be a great guard, and you don't really have many answers at guard right now. in my opinion. I think you've got potentially some more answers at tackle, with Sexton and Taylor and Ozida, even who's the Logan Howland. I mean, you've got some young guys that you could kind of plug in there. Oklahoma's targeting a tackle in the transfer portal, a Michigan State grad transfer. I'm blanking on his name right now. Spencer Brown, who, is a big dude that's going to have an opportunity to be really, really good. So, I mean, one, I trust Bill Bedenbaugh to know where Caden Green's best fit's going to be, but the guy's got the athleticism to play both spots. But also, there's something to be said for okay, you just got to play your first year of college football at guard. Let's let you stay at guard this year, this offseason, as long as we're good other spots. Let you continue to build upon that. And then if after this next year they decide, hey, we think you'd be best fit at tackle, then let's bump you out to tackle. Because, it's like Dominic says here. Dominic Gomez says Caden fit like a glove at left guard. He really did. I mean, he's got the size and the physicality and the athleticism to be a big-time player at guard. And so many times, we're starting to see more guards being taken in the top 30, top 40 of the NFL draft because teams are understanding that being able to block on the interior makes life so much easier for your quarterback, that if you can disrupt that interior pass rush, it's a lot better. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with him, but I think they have more options at tackle in-house right now than they do at guard.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And obviously you can tinker a little bit, not a lot of it. You got to figure that out relatively quickly.
Well, and if they're going to tinker, go left guard to left tackle, not left guard to right tackle. Keep the same steps, the same movements. It's a more similar. It's a smoother transition if you're going from left guard to left tackle than if you're having to flip to the other side of the offensive line and then rework your footwork, rework your stance, rework which hand you're gonna punch with. It's all a little bit different. It can be done. It's not an impossible transition. Guys do it all the time, but it is a transition. So if you're gonna tinker with left guard, left tackle. Don't bump them to the right side. Yeah, no, that all makes sense. And again, what I was going to say is you've got a couple of, tinker games early potentially. And, obviously the good news is if it isn't great, if you don't love it at left tackle, then left guard again, as Dominic said, Caden fit like a glove at left guard. So you've got that option to fall back on. Didn't ask about the quarterback situation. Do you think Oklahoma's going to go find a vet QB out of the portal? I mean, obviously you got Hawkins coming in. What kind of quarterback are you thinking? I saw some people floating around the Casey Thompson idea, which would actually be a great fit. But can you convince Casey Thompson that, his role as a guaranteed backup is good enough? That's a great question. I think that's a great fit if he's at this point in his career where he kind of comes to this realization, I'm not an NFL quarterback. If he comes to that realization and decides hey, I'm going to go the coaching route, I'm going to start kind of getting my feet wet in that role as a backup, then it makes sense. I would really love to see Casey Thompson in an Oklahoma uniform. If you can convince him this is a good role for him, I think he'd be a great mentor. Am I going crazy? Is Davis Bevel out of eligibility? I don't know. That's a good looking question. Because I just assumed that he would be back and he'd be your veteran backup. And I just assumed that Oklahoma and Sooner Nation assumed that maybe you could find somebody different. Well, sure, you could. And honestly, Casey Thompson raises your backup quarterback ceiling. I think he's a better quarterback than Davis. I mean, no disrespect to Davis, but I think that's the case. But I just think there's also some security in having somebody that in the quarterback room that can be a little bit of that mentor. Brent Venables knows Davis Bevel. Jackson Arnold knows Davis Bevel. And honestly, if something were to happen to Jackson Arnold and you needed to go to your backup quarterback, it needs to be Michael Hawkins getting those snaps and not Davis Bevel. I mean, you can give him some, but the SEC schedule dates released, Josh, what is that, December 13 or 15? Ding, 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 December 13th. So what would that be? That would be a week from Wednesday is when we'll see the SEC schedule unveiling.
it will be, let's see, a partial broadcast across ESPN and the SEC network. So we're going to get the finalized schedule for Oklahoma?
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. We know that they'll start with Tennessee and SEC play. And I just know that they're going to end up with Missouri at the end of the season. That just seems like a great rivalry week type of game, even though we might not consider Missouri a quote unquote rival. There's just a lot of history there when you've played almost 100 times. Danks 580 says Hawkins is coming into work. Better believe that. Echoing something that Mr. Mike Hawkins Sr. said on Twitter as well, that Michael doesn't take a backseat to anybody. He's not coming in to be QB2. So, I love the mentality. If you've got that mindset, you're going to go and you're going to put the work in, you're going to push, and you're going to push everybody. So that's not a bad mentality to have.
That scramble, was it Parker Thune that was populating that out there? It was a good-looking scramble to the pylon, but we knew that Michael Hawkins had that type of dual threat capability to him. So, and maybe this is the mode of operation for, this season until you get to next season, and then you've kind of cranked that depth up a little bit, and hopefully, retainment on quarterbacks is always going to be challenging for blue chip type kids like Michael Hawkins and Sperry and Arnold and you name it, if they're not your starting quarterback as it just kind of naturally goes down the line. But the hope would be, right, that if it's Michael Hawkins this next season as a true freshman, that maybe he's your best option as a backup quarterback, John. I'm not ruling that out. I mean, that was the situation Oklahoma had this year with Jackson Arnold, and pressed into duty late in the season. He was able to make just enough plays at BYU to go win a game. And obviously the schedule for the most part is going to crank up a little bit for Oklahoma in the SEC. So that would be more challenging for a backup quarterback, but I don't mind that being the situation for one more year. I don't think that you have to be married to the idea, we have to have a veteran backup quarterback. If Michael Hawkins is more talented, Michael Hawkins is the backup quarterback.
Yeah, and I think that's where they go with it. We saw it this year. Jackson Arnold proved that he was ready to be the backup quarterback to Dillon Gabriel, and pressed into duty. He was ready to go. And I think, honestly, had he had to play for a majority of the season, I still think Oklahoma pushes for 10 wins, even with Jackson Arnold at quarterback, because he's just a good player. And I think if Michael Hawkins were inserted into a game, it would be okay. He's got the running ability. He's got the throwing ability to be a big-time player at the collegiate level. So great question here from Dominic J. Gomez. Who are we looking for at starting tight end next year? That was kind of where I was going next. And the name that's popped up, Jalen Conyers. There was a report from an Arizona State beat writer that Oklahoma was hosting him on a visit. I think that hosting is happening, or it's happened. But it's going to be an intriguing option. He was part of Oklahoma's 2020 signing class as well, and then transferred after that first season with the Sooners, again, under a completely different coaching staff. But an athletic dude who made some plays at Arizona State, he was second in receptions and second in yardage with the Sun Devils this year, which is pretty impressive considering Arizona State was one of the worst passing offenses in the country. They were 127th in passing touchdowns per game and 88th in passing yards at 210 passing yards per game. So they were pretty garbage. The Sun Devils were passing the football, which is not going to bode well for them in the Big 12 next year if you can't throw it. I think that's an intriguing option there. To me, he seems more like the kind of the quote unquote move tight end. You're going to need him to be an inline blocker, but where his strengths will lie, we're going to be in the passing game. And yeah, Davin Mitchell, as everybody's kind of talking about in the chat, he's going to have to get ready to go too, because I think they're going to need to rely upon him. Caden Helms, that's a name that we need to not forget. Yes, Jason Llewellyn went into the portal. Caden Helms is another one of those names that just needs to stay healthy during the offseason. If he can stay healthy in the offseason, I think he can really help Oklahoma next year, and I think they're going to need him to. Again, another athletic dude that can make some plays in the passing game.
McIntyre seems like seems like the coaching staff is pretty high on his IQ, and you get, you can speak to this too, John, going to Sooner Media Days before the season started. Cade McIntyre looked like a high school kid.
Yeah. He looked like he should play wide receiver for this team. He didn't look like a college tight end just yet.
No. And so obviously where I'm going with that is You get a year down the road, and I would imagine he's going to look like a college tight end by the time we get to 2024. So he's somebody that if it's, inline run blocking you're talking about, John, if it's getting down and out in some route concepts and getting downfield and being a pass catcher for Oklahoma, I would expect McIntyre to make a big leap forward just because it seems like the coaching staff is really high on him. But they're going to get help. They're going to sounds like Conyers is going to be in Oklahoma sooner. At least you got a really good chance there. Obviously, Mitchell, I think, is just talented enough that it's tough to be a tight end and play in the SEC or play major college football. I get all that, but he might be so talented, John, that he's just going to be able to play.
Yeah, there's a great question over there in the chat. Why can't Davin Mitchell start immediately? And it's not that he can't. It's just the step up from the high school game to the college game, similar to the college game to the NFL game. It's really hard for tight ends to make that transition. That's not to say that Mitchell cannot do it. It's just kind of understanding expectations a little bit because they've got so much that they've got to learn. They're not just learning, the passing game concepts. They got to learn the running game concepts. They got to learn not just what they're doing, but what the tackle is doing next to them. They got to learn what the wide receivers are doing in the blocking. They got to learn what the running backs are supposed to do as well on a particular run play. So there's so much for those guys to absorb that, and there's a little bit physically different level of play from going and playing at Los Alamitos High School and playing against some of the teams that they'll play and then stepping up and playing Tennessee, in the fourth week of the season, or then hosting Alabama and playing against some of those guys. Like it's a different game. The level of physicality, the level of athleticism, it's just different, but it's the same transition you see from the college level to the NFL level. Kyle Pitts, arguably one of the best tight ends we've seen aside from Brock Bowers over the last decade, struggling at the NFL level because it takes time for tight ends to acclimate to the NFL level. David Njoku, he was a really, really good college tight end, struggled when he got to the NFL level for a long time. Dalton Schultz, another one from Stanford, a solid tight end, took him several years before he really took off for the Dallas Cowboys. It's just the way it goes a lot of times. It's the same thing for interior defensive line. It's just a different game when you go from high school to college and college to the NFL. Things just change. And yeah, Robbie Martin, he makes a great point here. Davin Mitchell is a junior. And he's going to enroll early. Like he's going to graduate early and then enroll early. So he's going to be very young when he gets on campus. So listen, if he comes to Norman and he just blows everybody away and becomes the starter, man, more power to him. High five Davin Mitchell. But let's temper expectations a little bit and not put so much on this kid and say, you got to come in and start right away. I feel like that does him a disservice to say you got to show up and be ready to go right now because listen, if he does it, again, I will be the first to applaud him and congratulate him on that. But I just think it's too much too soon. Prove me wrong, though. Prove me wrong. Prove me you can handle it. I would love to see that. But to your point about Caden McIntyre, too, I think that there's another really interesting element to play. Several folks were talking in the chat about the H-back situation. He could be a great option for an H-back. Someone who's not having to block in line just yet, can kind of be more of a fullback type, play in the backfield, get moved around the formation a little bit more, and then, get him out there in space because he's really, really good. Kind of reminds me a little bit of he could be that Jeremiah Hall type, I think. He doesn't have to be a 240, 250 type to go and have an impact this next year.
A bunch of people in the chat are asking about kicker, punter, and
it don't matter. I'm just kidding.
Didn't got the party started, punter or kicker in the portal. And a couple of people were pointing out Liam Evans, by the way, is the Coles kicker, right? The Coles kicking 5-star, top kicker in the state of Oklahoma. This is, every once in a while, these folks play at the schools that we broadcast a lot for on KREFsports.tv. And I can tell you for a long time, Liam Evans has been a Division I kicker. I mean, he's got 50-plus yard field goals that he's made on the high school level in his bag. He'll only get stronger and all those sorts of things. He'll get better coaching, I'm sure, at the next level. So you worry about the psyche when one thing goes wrong with a kicker at the next level. But if we're talking just physical tools of a kicker, John, he's the most natural in my 13 years of broadcasting high school football in Oklahoma of a kicker that I've seen regularly. He's a big-time kicker.
And if he can come in and usurp that role from Zach Schmidt, I'd be happy to see that. It'd be great. At punter, I think I'm happy to go into the season with Luke Elzinga and just see if he can continue to develop as a punter. Because I felt like over the course of the season, he got better and better. Build on that and go from here into 2024, and you feel comfortable with what you got. A few more questions here. Dank 580, David Stone going to start? I don't know. Maybe. I doubt it, but maybe.
I think both David Stone and Jaden Jackson will start for Oklahoma, if not initially, at some point next season. I just think they, as my friends Tyler McComas and Teddy Lehman would like to say on The Rush, they different. They a little bit different from what Oklahoma's had in the past. And
again, I come back to it's just different playing on the interior defensive line versus when you're in high school versus college. So would I be thrilled if my man Jaden Jackson, my favorite player in the class, became a starter year one? Yes, I'd be thrilled. I'm just not going to put that out there into the universe and expect it to happen. Another question, KC fan asked, anybody care about the bowl game? I kind of do. I think it's going to be a fun one. I'm always down to see Oklahoma play football. So I think we can learn a lot about this team, given that Jackson Arnold's going to start. You're going to see some impressive skill players and Nick Anderson and Jaden Gibson and Brennan Thompson. One more ride for Drake Stoops, probably. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I like the fact that you don't play Arizona much. And yeah. I talked about this yesterday. You got the incoming to the Big 12, outgoing from the Big 12. You've got the fact that each of these two teams are orchestrating pretty nice turnarounds from 2022 to 2023. So I get it. It's not Penn State. It's not a New Year's Six game. I do think Oklahoma got snubbed. I don't know how you can put Ole Miss in or Penn State in over Oklahoma when OU's got that Texas win. If you think that if you think Texas right now is one of the college football playoff teams, then I don't understand why that win doesn't count more than a couple of close losses. So I don't know, but it is what it is. Ultimately Oklahoma, as we dissected, John, OU's got OU to blame for being in the Alamo Bowl and not in the New Year's Six. And it's now with Jackson Arnold likely starting and playing this game. Now it's going to be a little more interesting for Oklahoma fans.
Yeah, it's going to be. I think it'll be a well-tuned-in game and probably a well-represented game for Sooner Nation as well down there in San Antonio. Kim asks about Andy Bass. Isn't that the plan for him to play H-back? The plan is to play running back / wide receiver for him, but unfortunately, I think Andy Bass tore his ACL in their state championship win. So probably going to get the Eric McCarty treatment and redshirt, have a complete redshirt year next year as he gets healthy. Unfortunate. The dude was just on a tear. So would love to have him out there as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Any parting thoughts there, Josh, before we get out of here?
I don't think so. It's been great to see everybody in the chat. Obviously, these next 2-3 weeks here before we wish you all a very Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, it's going to start going the opposite direction for Oklahoma, where they're going to be additive out of the transfer portal. And that's going to be fascinating to watch develop for OU, where I think right now you're seeing those scales tip one direction, which is let's create some room. Let's find some space. I do think there's an element of a couple of guys have probably not been served their walking papers, John, but been given an honest assessment of where they sit in the depth chart pecking order. And now Oklahoma, I think, again, is going to go start being additive. So I can't wait to see what happens coming up these next couple of weeks. We're going to have a lot to break down with you for all of the members of the Everyday Club right here on Locked On Sooners.
That's right. So make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Sooners wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on every podcast platform and on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button and that notification bell to let you know when new episodes drop. Stick around. The Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Dallas live streams are coming at you 24/7. You can subscribe to those shows as well. You can get all the great Locked On content you want at your fingertips all the time. Go subscribe to it. You got a favorite team? Texas Rangers, Oklahoma City Thunder, Dallas Stars? Go subscribe to one of those Locked On shows and make them your second listen of the day. But follow Josh on Twitter at JoshOnRef, myself at John9Williams. The show is at Locked On Sooners on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, all of the socials. But until next time, where we'll continue to discuss transfer portal and recruiting, Early signing period's coming up. He's Josh Helmer. I'm John Williams. We'll talk to you next time. Boomer Sooner. I don't know why I didn't end.